There are some things you don't talk about at the dinner table. Some names you don't say. Some feelings you fold up small and tuck away in a drawer. I thought I could keep it all hidden. The anger, the grief, the confusion. But healing doesn't come from hiding. It comes from letting the light in, even if it starts as just a crack. My name is Lily, and this is the story of how I faced the past I thought I'd outrun. I remember the first time I realized something was wrong. I was 8, sitting on the stairs, listening to voices behind a closed door. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the silence that came after. The kind that fills a house like fog. No one ever said, "This isn't your fault." No one ever said anything. So I learned to stay quiet, to carry my questions like pebbles in my pocket, small enough to hide, heavy enough to feel. There were good moments, too. A picnic in the backyard, juice boxes and folding chairs. The way my brother used to sneak cookies from the kitchen and leave one on my windowsill like a secret truce. I remember my mom brushing my hair before school, the smell of her lavender lotion, how her hands were gentle, even when her eyes were far away. And I remember the day my dad forgot my birthday, how no one mentioned it, how I sat at dinner, pretending I liked soup. Even the good things felt like borrowed time, like joy was something we weren't allowed to keep. So I grew up learning how to smile without showing all my teeth, how to change the subject, how to be the one who holds everything together. I was the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who always knew where the scissors were. And for a while, that worked. It took me years to understand that the problem wasn't loud. It wasn't fists or slammed doors. It was the silence. The way we avoided each other's eyes. The way truth hovered in the corners, too heavy to carry, too dangerous to name. No one talked about the sadness. Not my father, who buried himself in work. Not my mother, who smiled for the neighbors but disappeared behind closed doors. Not my brother, who left as soon as he could and called only on holidays. We lived like roommates in a house full of secrets. And I became the good one, the calm one, the one who never made things worse. But being the quiet one doesn't mean you're okay. Sometimes it just means you've learned to survive without asking for anything. And that's what hurt the most. Not the things we said, but the things we never said. Now, I live alone in a small studio apartment. 3rd floor, no elevator, but there's a window that faces west. And every evening the light turns the wall gold. I make lists every morning. Groceries, bills, people I need to email. It helps me feel in control. Like if I can check enough boxes, maybe nothing will fall apart. I'm polite at work, always on time, always saying yes. Even when I'm exhausted, even when I want to say no. I answer texts with smiley faces. I ask how others are doing, but I almost never talk about myself. And sometimes, when something good happens, a kind word, a small win, my first instinct is to keep it quiet. Like joy is something fragile that might not survive being shared. I don't cry easily, not because I'm strong, but because I learned to hold everything in until it turns into something else. I'm not sad, not really. Just careful. Like I'm always bracing for something that might not even be coming. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing big, just a mix-up at work. Someone forgot to copy me on an email, and a project I'd spent hours on was suddenly already handled. I smiled, said it was fine, said no worries. Then I went into the supply closet and closed the door. And I broke. Silent at first, just shaking hands. Tears I couldn't blink away. But then something rose in my chest, hot and tight and sharp, and I hit the shelf with my palm. Not to hurt, just to make a sound that matched what I felt. I slid to the floor, knees to chest, surrounded by boxes of printer paper and extra pens. And I whispered, I'm so tired of pretending everything is okay. It wasn't about the email. It wasn't about work. It was the years of swallowing pain so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. It was the silence I inherited. The strength that was never soft. The fear that saying, this hurts, would make me weak or unlovable. I sat there for a long time. No one knocked. No one noticed. And when I stood up again, I felt different. Not fixed, but opened. Just enough to start telling the truth. A week later, it happened again. This time in the break room. Someone was microwaving fish. Someone else was complaining about weekend plans. And someone, a well-meaning coworker, joked, Willie's always so calm. I bet she never gets mad. I laughed. Too loudly. Sharp and brittle. Then I dropped my coffee. It hit the floor and shattered. Ceramic in pieces, liquid spreading like a quiet scream. Everyone froze. I muttered, sorry, and crouched down with paper towels, trying not to cry in front of the vending machine. That's when Zoe knelt beside me. She didn't say anything at first, just helped me clean it up. Then she touched my arm, lightly, like she wasn't sure I'd let her, and said, Hey, have you ever talked to someone? Like a therapist? I opened my mouth to deflect, to joke, to say I was just tired. But the words didn't come. Just a slow breath and a tiny nod. She handed me a napkin. "Doesn't mean you're broken," she said. "Just means you're human." And that's the first time I considered maybe I didn't have to carry everything by myself. The first appointment was awkward. I sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, waiting for the therapist to ask the right questions. I answered politely, talked about work stress, about sleep, but not about the real things. Not about the way my chest tightened when someone raised their voice, or how I flinched when a door closed too hard. I walked out feeling like I'd done it wrong. Like maybe healing wasn't for people like me. People who kept their lives tidy on the outside even when everything inside was cracked. The second therapist was kinder, but too soft. Too many nods and not enough guidance. I didn't need someone to just listen. I needed someone to see me, to press gently where it hurt. The third time I almost canceled. I sat in my car, watching rain hit the windshield, heart racing like I was about to confess something. But I went in, and this time, something felt different. The therapist didn't fill the silence. She let it stretch. And somehow, that space felt safe. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "You don't have to know," she said. "We'll figure it out together." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that was true. One day, a few sessions in, I found myself talking about the hallway. Not a memory exactly, more like a feeling. The tension of walking past a closed door. The way I used to hold my breath. Just in case. My therapist didn't interrupt. When I finally looked up, I expected a clinical explanation, a label, a theory. But instead she said, "That sounds like fear pretending to be responsibility." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You were the one who kept the peace, weren't you? The one who smoothed things over, who made sure nothing spilled out too far." I nodded slowly, and suddenly it made sense. Why I apologized too much. Why conflict made my stomach ache. Why I felt tired all the time, even when nothing was wrong. I had learned to carry things that were never mine to hold. And just recognizing that, just naming it, felt like loosening a knot I didn't even know had been pulling tight for years. A few days later, it was something small. My coworker asked if I could stay late. Again. Normally, I would have said yes before even checking my schedule. But this time, I paused. I looked at my planner. I thought about how tired I'd been. And then, quietly, I said, "I can't tonight. I need to rest." No apology, no excuse, just truth. The silence after felt strange, like a room I used to tiptoe in, but could now walk through. My coworker nodded. "Of course. Thanks for letting me know." That was it. No fallout, no drama. Just a moment where I chose myself instead of the old pattern. And when I walked my car that night, I didn't feel guilty. I felt light, not because the world had changed, but because I had. It happened at the cafe. I'd been going there more often, not to meet anyone, just to sit with my journal, sip something warm, and feel like part of the world without having to perform. That day, the last window seat was taken, so I sat at the corner table near the wall, the one with the wobbly leg and the chipped mug I always hoped not to get. I was halfway through writing a thought about letting go of what wasn't mine to carry when someone asked, "Mind if I sit?" I looked up. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't closed off either. Green shirt, keys hooked to his belt loop, a face that looked like it had weathered a few storms and stopped pretending to be fine all the time. I hesitated, then nodded. He sat without a word, opened a notebook of his own, didn't speak again. But something in his presence felt familiar, like someone who'd spent time undoing knots, too. For the next hour, we shared the silence. Pages turning, mugs emptying, no tension, no pressure, just the strange comfort of being alone, beside someone else. As I stood to leave, he looked up. "Thanks for sharing the corner," he said. I offered a small smile. "I'm Lily." "Daniel." He nodded once. And I left. But that night when I opened my journal, the page still smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee, and my writing came easier. That night, I lit a candle. Not for a reason, just because I wanted to. I sat on my couch, blanket over my legs, journal in my lap, and thought about the man from the cafe, Daniel. Not in the fluttery, fantasy way I used to imagine love, but in a quieter way. Like a question I hadn't thought to ask, and didn't need an answer to right away. There had been no sparks, no shared glances over lattes, just comfort. Two people in a corner, both learning how to be whole. I wrote that down. Maybe this is how it starts. Not with lightning, but with shelter. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel so heavy. It felt open, like a page not yet written, but ready. The next morning, I sat at the window, a cup of tea warming my hands. The sky outside was pale blue, soft clouds moving like slow thoughts. I thought about my family. From the outside, nothing looked broken. No shouting matches, no door slammed, just silences, tense dinners, pressure that wrapped around my chest like a sweater one size too small. Sometimes the hardest patterns to see are the ones that seem ordinary. Families that look fine, but teach us to shrink, to please, to put ourselves second without even realizing it. But now, I saw the loop. And more importantly, I saw a way out. It wouldn't be loud or dramatic. It would be quiet, daily, intentional. I would speak more honestly, say what I needed, and believe I was worth listening to. The past had shaped me, but it didn't get to hold the pen anymore. I took a breath. Long, deep, steady, and turned the page. It was a quiet afternoon at the corner cafe, The same spot where I sometimes brought my notebook, scribbling fragments of thoughts between sips of tea. I sat beneath the awning, a soft breeze stirring the edge of the page. Across the street, someone familiar appeared. A figure moving with a calm, easy rhythm. Daniel! He wasn't walking quickly, just passing through the neighborhood, a book tucked under his arm. Our eyes met. He paused, raised a hand in a small wave, then hesitated and crossed the street. "Hi," he said, voice just above the hum of traffic. "Hey," I replied, my fingers still resting on the open page. Daniel glanced at the empty chair across from me. I nodded toward it. Not an invitation, just space. He sat. For a while, we didn't say much, just shared the air, the clink of cups, and the soft rustle of afternoon wind. There was no promise in it, no need for one, only a beginning, quiet and steady, like a story waiting to unfold.
If you enjoyed this lesson, click here for another learning video.